Hey YouTube, today I want to talk about my Atlas Pro-9D 2-post lift behind me. I've had this lift for just over a year now. I've put maybe 15 to 20 different vehicles on it. I've had it long enough to form some pretty strong opinions about it. And overall, I think it's a great value for the money that you spend. However, I personally would not buy this lift again, and we're going to talk about why. So just really quick on the price, this lift listed at $2,000 and then it cost $300 to get it shipped. I did have it installed by a local company here. I will post the full invoice for you. But when we talk about kind of comparing with other lifts, I'm going to exclude like shipping and install because that's kind of the same no matter what lift you get in this category. So really like focus in on that $2,000 number, which is a pretty low number for a lift like this. So just some quick specs. As the name would suggest, this is a 9,000 pound capacity lift. It is also clear floor, meaning you have this overhead bar, but you have nothing on the floor connecting the two columns to roll over, which is really nice. It's also symmetric, even though this front arm actually can rotate back like you would see on an asymmetric lift. The positioning of the columns makes it symmetric, which you have to keep in consideration when you're positioning your vehicle on there. And then the last thing I'll point out is this is a pretty narrow lift overall. You can see, my little car here, there's not that much room on each side of it. And in just a minute here, I'll pull my truck on so you can get a closer look at that. But I will post a link for the full specs on this list in the description. So before we get too deep into likes and dislikes here, I do want to give you some context. This is obviously not a commercial application. This is my house, but I did work as an automotive technician for 6 years. And in that time, had the opportunity to work on a variety of lifts, including single post in ground, 2-post in ground, alignment racks, scissor lifts, and I spent a lot of time actually on a 10,000 pound rotary asymmetrical 2-post lift, and I loved that lift. So take what I say about this lift with a grain of salt. So the first thing I love about this lift is the size. For a lift in this category, it was actually really hard for me to find something that would fit under my ceiling height. My walls are exactly 12 foot tall, so 144 inches. And then by the time I put drywall on, it was 143 and a half. I used 1/2 inch drywall. So this lift comes in, I think on the spec sheet, right at 143 inches. And it was close. Let me see if I can zoom in on this cable here. This cable will actually slap the drywall because there's a little bit of slack on that cable. But, I was pretty limited in my options, and this lift definitely fit the bill. The other thing in terms of size is that, I mentioned the narrow configuration. That's been really nice. It allowed me to kind of have the flexibility to space this lift off the wall pretty far. My goal was to be able to roll a cart through here and have no issues. And then in terms of size too, these columns, because it's a 9,000 pound lift, the actual footprint of the base of the column is pretty small as well. And so, it kind of maximizes the width between the columns in terms of driving through, but doesn't put this kind of massive base plate out in the middle of everything. So another thing I really like is this offset front arm. I don't like symmetric lifts. If I could have fit an asymmetric in here, I would have put one in, but I couldn't. So the next best thing is having this front arm that offsets and allows you to spin it towards the back. If you look on this side here, typically this is how a symmetrical lift would be configured, and this front arm would have to stay in front as you back the car in or drive the car in. And you end up having to roll the whole car forward and back to get both arms under there. So the front arm rotating towards the back is really nice. And even though this lift is a pretty narrow configuration, even when I put trucks on here, I have no problem backing in when that arm is rotated. So the last thing I like about this lift, other than I'll say the price, which if you're shopping around, you understand what $2,000 means versus some of the rotaries and the bend packs and things that are quite a bit more expensive. But the last thing I like is that this lift, despite being smaller, has proved to be pretty versatile. The widest thing I've had on here is a Ford Raptor. The heaviest thing is a Super Duty truck. Interestingly enough, the most difficult thing I've had to put on here was a Ford Edge Sport, and we'll talk about that a little more when I get to what I don't like. But I will insert here kind of a little montage of some of the vehicles I've had up and down on this lift so you can get a feel for what it can do. So you can see pretty versatile, but now what I'm going to do, I've said everything good I can say about this lift. What I'm going to do is start talking about what I don't like, and to show that, I'm first going to put my car up on there, and then we'll switch it out and I'll pull my truck in and put it up on there. So in some of those videos you just saw, you saw me walking under the car, and I was trying to give you an idea of how high the car is and how much like head clearance there is. And just for reference, I'm 5'6", so I'm not a very tall guy. And as you can see, I don't have a whole lot of space under there with the car at its highest point. And the lift goes like maybe 3 inches higher than this, but then when you put it down on the highest lock setting, this is the lift on the highest lock setting. So take a look at me at 5'6", getting under this car. Now you might be thinking, well, you told us this lift is kind of shorter than some of the others, but it's only 2 inches shorter than the rotary and about 6 inches shorter than the bend pack. And you can see that this car has about 3 feet. It could go further before hitting that crossbar. And even when I have trucks on here, I'm still like, I couldn't hit the crossbar if I wanted to with a truck on this lift. So one of the things to look for is not just the height of the lift frame, but actually the travel of the lift itself. And in my opinion, this lift does not have enough travel relative to its overall height. So even though I've said this lift is versatile, there's kind of an inherent problem here in that since it's a narrow configuration and these arms are 2-stage arms, meaning this is stage 1 and this is stage 2 in terms of telescoping, it actually makes it kind of hard to lift vehicles like the Ford Edge that I had on here, because the arms actually don't go in enough. And you can see on my Civic here, this arm is all the way in and this arm is all the way in as well. And these other two, they're out a little bit just because I'm not entirely centered on the lift. But what they do is they give you this pad here, and that's nice. So you can use this pad on a shorter wheelbase vehicle. But what it kind of does is force you to shift the vehicle further forward, which you don't necessarily want to do on a front wheel drive where all the weight is in the front like most of our SUVs. So it really does impact the versatility a little bit. You know, I work on mostly small cars and then bigger trucks, but if I was somebody that was going to work on a lot of mid-size SUVs, like I've never tried to lift a newer Explorer, but I don't know that this could do it. And if it could, the problem that you're going to run into is that you have to be absolutely perfectly set up on this lift. Like, you know, this Civic is offset a couple inches and I can still lift it. But what you're going to find with some of your mid-size SUVs is that you're going to be making really minute adjustments to the vehicle position just to try to get the lift arms under there in a safe position. So that's kind of a long-winded way of saying, in my personal opinion, if you're going to work on a lot of SUVs, you either need a wider lift with two-stage arms like this, or if the lift is narrower like this one is, you need to find a lift with three-stage arms so that you've got more flexibility on the vehicle position. So now for the fun part, let's get the truck on here and talk about how this lift performs with something heavier and bigger on it. As you can see, no issue backing the truck in and getting it centered, even with the lift arms pointed towards the back. Don't mind all the snow and salt. It is February in Michigan, so it is what it is. Let's get this thing in the air and take a look. So before I go any higher, I'm going to show you where I have this thing set. You can kind of see it's just behind the B-pillar line. It's a really comfortable spot for this truck on this lift. And I do want to take you over down to the driver door and kind of show you with this narrow configuration and being an asymmetrical lift, or sorry, a symmetrical lift, you know, your door, they provide you this nice little bumper here, which is great. But it, you know, the door handle still hits. But I can barely get in there, so just know that you're gonna have to kind of back the truck up, get in there, and then roll it forward to get it on the lift once you're out of there. So I ran the truck all the way to the top just to make a point. It's not on the locks right now. It's the very highest the lift will go. And I know it's hard to see. Sorry, I'm not tall enough, but it's still a couple inches from that crossbar where it would stop the lift. So it's a lot different than the rotary I used to work on. Like almost anything I put on that rotary, I could hit the crossbar if I wasn't paying attention. And then really quick, I'll show you with the truck at the highest setting here, what I look like under it at 5 foot 6 inches tall. Okay, so with the truck in the air here, this brings me to really my last point about this lift in terms of what I don't like about it. And you're probably wondering why I wouldn't buy this lift again. So let's go take a look under the truck and I'll try to explain. So you can see under here, I've got plenty of adjustment for this size truck. I've also had quad cab, short bed trucks on here and been fine. The rear arms are pretty close to being maxed out. I would not feel comfortable putting a quad cab long bed truck on this lift. I think you would run into an issue where the rear arms just don't reach far enough. But that kind of brings me to my last point of what I don't like about this lift is it does not feel like a 9,000 pound lift to me. If you start looking at these rear arms, you'll notice they're starting to deflect, as in they're not parallel to the ground anymore. And I feel really comfortable with this lift. And as far as this truck goes, this truck weighs maybe 5,000 or 6,000 pounds, and it feels fine. You're starting to see some of that deflection. But when we had the Super Duty on here, or if we put the Raptor on here, you start to get a little uneasy. And it's not to say it didn't work. We had the Super Duty up here for 14 hours working on it, and it worked fine, but it's just kind of that feeling of security that you have when you're working under something like this. And I realize that that's very subjective, but to me, this feels more like a 7,000 to 8,000 pound lift as far as the construction and the feeling you get when you're under it versus a 9,000 pound lift. So take that for what it's worth. Probably because the arms are starting to show some of that deflection, when you get to like the back of the vehicle or all the way to the front and you start making repetitive like up and down motions with a ratchet or something, we've all done that under a lift where the whole vehicle kind of starts to rock up and down because you didn't realize you were, you know, creating a motion like that. That seems to happen really easily on this lift. You really have to watch yourself as far as kind of the pressure you're putting on your ratchet up and down. So that's not a great feeling. So with all that said, as you can see, there are things I like about the lift, probably more things that I don't like about the lift. But if you are space constrained and you're shopping in that $2,000 price range, I don't think you're gonna find a better lift than this in that price range. Me personally, I wish I would have spent maybe another $500 or $600 and I could have fit, there's a lift made by Derek Weaver that's a 10,000 pound lift. It also has 3-stage arms. It would have fit in this building. And if I do put another lift next to this one, that's the lift that I would try next. If you're not space constrained, personally, I think the bend pack is a no-brainer. You know, really good quality stuff. And then rotary is tough at almost $5,000. If you're just a homeowner and not using it commercially, that's really hard to justify. But I did absolutely love working on my rotary lift when I had one as a technician. So take my opinions in this video for what they're worth. I hope this was helpful for you. This is my first time doing a review video, so let me know in the comments how I can improve, and thanks a lot. I'll catch you next time.